Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Play on GAA podcast, another episode of the Club Roundup. I have Luke here with me, and this is another Gaelic football edition. Luke, how's it going?
Oh, good, Seamus. Good, a great weekend of action. So, yeah, looking forward to getting into it.
Certainly did. Some really breathtaking matches. I mean, just some of the matchups straight away. Kilcoo against Glen. Obviously, the game we're going to start with, that was the main one that really had every fan up and down the country was dying to watch this match. Interesting enough, the coverage on TG Car was postponed due to the Junior Eurovision being shown, but eventually we got to see it. Do you think it lived up to the billing? Kilcoo obviously getting the win, late goal and extra time from Johnston, the key separator between the two sides. Kilcoo go through by a goal and 11 to 11 points. Do you think it lived up to the billing?
Yeah, look, it was absolutely intriguing. Anyway, I'll say that. I think both sides were very wary of each other, and I suppose any game where you're going to have Mickey Moran going up against Malachy O'Rourke, it was probably always going to be kind of a tactical enough encounter. And look, it was exactly that, I suppose, in the end. So I suppose kind of it was one of those games where you kind of got that sense through it that it was going to be decided by if any team made a mistake, just due to the nature kind of how hesitant, I suppose, both teams were on the ball. And ultimately, I suppose, the Glen kind of blinked first with Colin Bradley with a kick out that kind of went a bit astray. And look, Kilcoo punished it. And I suppose that was the only difference, I suppose, between the two sides, because it was an absolute arm wrestle of a game.
Without doubt, yeah. And do you think even though that Kilcoo have got through, what do you think the things that Derrygonnelly can take from the Glen in order to kind of give themselves a chance against Kilcoo? What do you think the potential weaknesses are there, having looked at how now, well, albeit a fantastic Glen side, but brought them all the way to extra time?
It's hard to know really, because like you look defensively at them, I thought they were really solid, and that they were very hard to break down. They have a good system that they all know what they're doing in there as well. Maybe the Glen kind of dominated midfield a bit, but I suppose like that's going to happen when you're coming up against Glass and Bradley as well in like as your direct opposition. So I think that was to be expected. And to be honest, I think there's more to come from Kilcoo, and the fact that Jerome Johnson only kicked the goal in extra time. Ryan Johnson only kicked the point. Paul Devon didn't score from play. So I think there's a lot more to come from them, and I think that when they were playing, I suppose at the weekend, it was kind of the pitch was really cutting up, tough conditions and everything. Glen were sitting really deep, and I think if they can get through the Ulster final against Derrygonnelly, I think that when they get to Croke Park and the wide open spaces, I think the likes of Conor Laverty, Ryan Johnson, Jerome Johnson, that they could be a really good free flowing team that could put up big enough scorelines. And yeah, so I just think it's a huge result for Kilcoo, and I think they'll only improve from here. So they'd probably be my All-Ireland favourites now, I'd say, having seen every team, and I think I wouldn't be too worried about any really aspect of their game right now, based off what I saw at the weekend.
Yeah, well, it's no doubt that they have taken the toughest route to get here that any of the 12 teams that are left have taken. I mean, to beat a Glen side who are tipped by many to go on and win the All-Ireland, I think me and you would agree that if Glen had have come through that extra time instead of Kilcoo, we would be tipping Glen as one of the favourites to go on and win the All-Ireland. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, look, well, I think I said it like 2 weeks ago that I think whoever won this game, I'd have as my favourites for the All-Ireland. To be honest, I thought based off the last game, I was leaning towards Glen before the start of the game. I suppose when you look at the end of normal time, that game could have went either way really. So it's just kind of testimony to kind of the quality of both teams today, and that there were some really good performers there too. It's particularly want to mention Micheál Rooney at wing back, who was like, he came up, kicked 2 huge scores for Kilcoo, and I think his performance was epitomised when he kind of came charging out of defence from with the last kick of the game that was kicked into the square, and the game was still in the balance there. So yeah, so like the likes of him have kind of completely emerged as a really strong player. And I was also really impressed with Dylan Ward in midfield. So there's so much talent in that Kilcoo side, and to be honest, I'd probably be leaning to them as my All-Ireland favourites now after witnessing that, I suppose, at the weekend compared to like some of the other teams that I've been looking at recently.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's between, especially now that Mountbelly and Moylock have been knocked out, for me, it's between themselves and Kilmacud Crokes for the All-Ireland, in my opinion. obviously Kilcoo, they're the side that have most recently been in the All Ireland Club Final out of any of the teams that are left in the country. And they got to that final. They played it in 2020, just before the pandemic hit, against Cork. How invaluable do you think that experience is to them now?
Yeah, look, I actually think that will be huge, to be honest. And look, they were very, very close to winning that final against Cork. I know there was a fair bit of messing going on at the end of the game, like between refereeing decisions, kind of, and a lot of stuff. That final nearly went to kind of farcical levels, I suppose, with the way I suppose some of it was handled towards the end. So they could easily have kind of came out on top that day. That experience is going to absolutely stand them, I think, as well. And look, we saw last year. I know it wasn't the freest scoring game, but I really feel that when they get to Croke Park, well, assuming that they win the Ulster final and get to Croke Park, like, they're going to have an almighty test against Derrygonnelly the next day out. I think that if they can get to Croke Park on a perfect kind of pristine surface and stuff, I think they're only going to improve. And some of the teams that we're looking at as from other provinces, I don't think they have the quality that Kilcoo have in their forward line. And yeah, so that's why I'd be expecting them to kind of kick on to another gear as soon as they get there. And like already, as you've already mentioned, they have that experience as well, and they know how to win in Croke Park. So yeah, I suppose that's essentially why I'd be kind of tipping them as me heavy enough favourites for the All Ireland right now.
Yeah, well, you mentioned there yourself about Derrygonnelly there just before, and obviously to get to the All Ireland series, they're going to have to go through Derrygonnelly. The Fermanagh Kingpins pulling off a very impressive victory over Clann Éireann of Armagh, winning the game by 6 points. What did you make of this game yourself?
Well, look, this one was an interesting one in that it essentially felt done, I suppose, after the first 15 minutes where Derrygonnelly scored the 3 goals early on, and they ran into a huge lead, and at half time even it was 3-5 to 4 points then. So like I think it was at the start it was 3-3 to no score in the first 15 minutes. So yeah, it's a huge kind of tally for Clann Éireann to have to try and pull back. And look, they did kind of come back into it as well, kind of up to the red card, I suppose, to McCarthy, I suppose, on 46 minutes or so. They looked like they were really getting back into that game. So it was a game of two halves, I suppose, a bit, but that's the start, I suppose, for Derrygonnelly. That was the win in the game for them. And they I suppose they've some really kind of big time players, and that we've already talked about the influence of all the Joneses kind of, and especially Connell and Ryan, and look, they were really, really good again. And in the first half, I suppose Shane McGullion with 2 goals as well was big. I know they lost Shane McGullion to a red card just before halftime, which probably brought Clann Éireann back into the game a little bit as well. The opening 15 minutes were probably where this game was won. But yeah, look, Derrygonnelly, they had to work for it, I suppose, in the end. And look, they'll be delighted to get through. And they, like we've already been talking, I suppose, about kind of bigging Kilcoo up and about how good they are. But it's important to remember that in 2019, Derrygonnelly were so close to knocking Kilcoo out then. So it's they'll be quietly confident, I think, going into that final now, though.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And as well as that, they're flying so nicely under the radar. No one seems to be remembering just how strong Derrygonnelly are. I mean, they're Fermanagh Kingpins for a reason. They are the best team in Fermanagh, without doubt. And to have made it to an Ulster final, they didn't make it here by chance. They beat a very good Clann Éireann side. And obviously they knocked out the Tyrone champions Dromore when no one saw that coming. So I wouldn't put it past them beating Kilcoo. I do think Kilcoo are favourites. But for anyone listening to this who hasn't really seen Derrygonnelly, as you mentioned yourself, the Joneses are crucial and Shane McGullion up front for them. But what else to you kind of makes them such a formidable team?
Well, I suppose, like, again, I think it's the Ulster Championship experience. I know this is their first final, but they've won a fair amount of Fermanagh titles in recent years. So look, they know how to win, and they're just a tough team to break down, I think, as well. And like we've talked about with Connell Jones in full forward, they've an out and out target man, and with McGullion beside them, they've got a player that's well capable of scoring there too. So yeah, look, they absolutely have the players, and we're talking kind of with they have a fair bit of intercounty experience too, and it's a wily enough team, I think. And so yeah, I wasn't that surprised to see them get over the line against Clann Éireann. Clann Éireann kind of that was their first Armagh title win in a long time. I suppose due to that, like the Derrygonnelly experience just kind of showed. And at the start of a game, when kind of steady heads are kind of needed, I think, look, Derrygonnelly, they really put them to the sword early on. And look, that's the winning and losing the game. So that kind of experience, I think, is going to really stand them going into it. And if they can drag Kilcoo into a real dogfight, look, it can go either way. I'd be honest, I would say that the final between Derrygonnelly and Kilcoo will go on a similar enough route, I suppose, to the game we saw against the Glen at the week. I think it'll be tactical enough. I think both teams will not want to make kind of huge mistakes. And I think, look, that style of game usually ends up in a 2 or 3 point difference in results. And I think it'll be fully in that bracket in the final. But I think I would still probably just be leaning Kilcoo by maybe 2 or 3 points.
Yeah, I'm going with Kilcoo as well, but I go with a very narrow victory. I predict Derrygonnelly will go down fighting. They've been, you mentioned it yourself, they're such a tough team to break down. So I think that they're going to drag Kilcoo and put them right through the pin of their collar. Speaking of semi-finals, we're moving now from the Ulster Championship to the Leinster Championship semi-finals. Kilmacud Crokes were pushed all the way by least champions Portarlington. Interesting enough, Crokes hit 18 wides in the first 45 minutes of the game. The key moment for me was when the substitute Cian O'Connor got in for a goal in the final quarter. Port responded very well to that. They went back into the lead, points from Adam Ryan and Stephen O'Neill. But then Paul Mannion hit 2 points and Shane Cunningham hit another point. And Crokes get over the line. Did they look impressive to you at all?
I wouldn't say they looked impressive. I think they struggled kind of for large parts of the first half, and then it was an interesting one in that nearly the key sub I thought for me was Conor Casey coming on for Craig Diaz in midfield, and I think at that point, look, I think they were already starting to take over the kickouts, and that sub, I think Crokes got a bit more mobility into midfield, and all of a sudden the kickout press, I think it just became that bit more effective and stuff. And at that point, I suppose, look, Osborne and the Port Ireland goal had a tough second half where, look, everything they tried to do from the kickouts didn't really work. So I suppose that was the impressive part from Crokes was the way in which they lorded it, I suppose, in around midfield in that second half. And look, with the sheer amount of possession they had, they were able to kind of drag their way back into it, considering that, look, they were 7-2 down at one point in the first half. So it's a good result for Crokes, because this is there's no doubt that's a really strong Port Arlington side. So to get the win is really good. But I wouldn't say I was hugely impressed by them, though.
Yeah, interesting enough. You mentioned there yourself about the fact that they were 7 points to 2 down. Now, if you're in the Crokes camp, would you be taking it more as a positive that they came back from that margin? Or would you be more worried that when they come up against the better teams, if they start so slow like that, then the game will have gone past them, if you like?
Yeah, well, I think that's a good point. And the more that they go on in the competition, I don't think they're going to come up against a team that will fade as much around the middle as Port Ireland did at the weekend. It was interesting to talk after the game with the Port Ireland manager, where he cited had 7 or 8 COVID cases in the build up to it, and that of all the lads that kind of were experiencing cramp at the end of the game, they were the ones that just recovered from COVID. So it was an interesting kind of nugget to take from that, whether the tiredness really kicked in for Port Ireland. But at the same time, look, you can't argue with the dominance the Crokes had in the last couple of minutes there. And they'll be very happy with, I think, how they were around the middle. And if they can try and replicate that the next day, that dominance of the kickouts, and once they got the kickout shape right with the press and everything as well, look, there was not only going to be one winner there. So they'll be delighted with, particularly the likes of Rory O'Carroll, even just collecting, breaking the ball around the middle. He won an absolute world of it. So yeah, the second half is a very positive for Crokes. I thought they were brilliant in the second half, but yeah, like you were saying, the first half will be probably what the stick that they're going to be beating with in training for the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they get on in now the Leinster Final. They're playing against Naas, who were taken to extra time by Shalmaliers, and they won out by 2 goals and 15 points to a goal and 13. Eamon Callaghan, now nearly 40 years of age, absolutely fantastic performance, a vintage display at Croke Park as they get past Shalmaliers. He scored 6 points in total with an equalising points from a free 5 minutes into stoppage time. So he saved them, and then they get the job done in extra time. Naas, of course, now led by player manager Owen Doyle, that madness of not having a manager, but it seems to not really be affecting them too much. and they are into the Leinster Final. How do you think they're going to do against Crokes now?
It's a tough one to know because, like, well, the fact is the Shamaliers left that game behind them, and they were in a winning position in normal time, and I suppose they were a point up with going into with the 3 minutes of extra time, and they had the ball up in the corner forward position in Nace's half, and it was, I can't remember exactly who it was, but there was a ridiculous kind of hand pass that completely surrendered possession. And from there, Nace got down the other end of the field, and then Eamon Callaghan wins the free to level it up and bring it to extra time. And once you got to that situation, Nace got their extra man back because of the red card. They were back to 15, and Shelmaliers were down to 14 because the black cards that had just happened as well. Like, first of all, I want to say, though, that's a ridiculous rule that at the start of extra time, you can get your red carded player back, but the black card still stands. That made no sense to me, I thought. And Shelmaliers were essentially punished more so for getting a black card than Nace were for getting a red card, even though the red card's the more serious offence. So I do think that's something the GA have to look at there. Look, I think Nace, they were absolutely blessed to kind of come through it. Probably were the better side, I think, better footballing team, and I think they have a better chance of putting it up to Crokes in the final. But look, they were very lucky at times too, though.
Yeah, you're dead right about the black card standing with the red card being cancelled. And to be honest, I never understood and still don't understand why that's a rule. If a player gets sent off, the player gets sent off. Simple as, you're down to 14 men. That's why it's given. I don't know why that rule still stands to this day.
I suppose that the idea it's given is that extra time's a new game and it's the start of a new period of time. But if that's the case, then surely the black card has to be kind of deemed that it's from a different game too. So that really didn't make much sense for me when I was watching at the time. And look, that was a big factor in Shamaliers losing the extra time, I suppose, as well. And that they had to go about the first 8 minutes of extra time with a man less, which would have tired them out even more as well. So that was that was definitely a factor too. But at the same time, I do think that Nace probably are the better team on the day as well. Like, I know he scored a goal in two, but I think they can get a lot more out of Darragh Curran going forward too. He didn't have his greatest day shooting, I think, as well. So I would expect that he's going to really kick on the next day against Crokes. And even the likes of Owen Doyle was kind of quiet enough. So I think for the sake of the final, I think Nace have the best chance of really putting it up to Crokes. And it'll be interesting to watch because they have some very good players.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And it'll be interesting to see how they get on in the final. I mean, I do agree that they have the better players, so they will be able to put it up to Crokes. There's no doubt that what you were talking about there with the black card standing and the red card, then a player coming back on, that had a huge impact, not only because they were a man down, but they were without their county player, Brian Malone. And then in extra time, doesn't really need to be said, but Nace outscored Shelmaliers by a goal and 4 to 2 points over the 20 minutes. Hannafin's late goal, that sealed it off. I mean, that's pretty hard to take for Shelmaliers. But for Nace, I mean, what an achievement. Having seen both of these sides in action, which one would you be kind of tipping now between Crokes and Nace?
I'd still probably be leaning towards Crokes based off what I've seen. I think Crokes are really professional kind of setup, and I think defensively they have a very good structure, and I think huge addition though, just to comment briefly, is I think Dan O'Brien back to wing back has been huge, and he won a huge amount of ball, and for a player that hasn't been playing there in previous years, he looks very, very good in that wing back position, often kind of slipping into cornerback too. So look, they're going to be tough to break down, and if they can do kind of what Shelmaliers did and largely kind of nullify Derek Kerwin and Luke Griffin. I know Kerwin stepped up at the big moment with the goal, but the two of them were very quiet, I thought, throughout the game. And if Crokes can do a similar thing, I would fully expect Crokes to come out on top against Nace. But look, at the same time as well, I think Nace will be in a better position to put up the Crokes in around the midfield as well. You're looking at James Burke kind of dropped into midfield for large parts of the game, and he won a huge amount of kickouts as well. So I think they'll be able to cope with the midfield battle an awful lot better than Port Arlington were. So look, it's going to be an interesting one to watch, and I suppose some of the matchups will be really, really interesting. I'd imagine Owen Doyle's going to pick up Paul Mannion it'd be interesting to see who they go with on Eamon Callaghan, whether Rory O'Carroll's picking him up, and then probably inside you're looking at maybe somebody like Killian O'Shea on Derek Kerwin. So it's going to be a really, really entertaining final, and I think once again, I think it'll be a similar look situation to the two semi-finals we saw at the weekend, where it's essentially either decided by 1 or 2 points, or it could be even extra time.
Yeah, I think it's going to go right down to the wire, the same as yourself. Moving then from the Leinster Football Championship to the Munster Club Football Championship, we predicted that it would be a St. Finbarrs versus Austin Stacks final. It is a St. Finbarrs versus Austin Stacks final. We'll start with the Finbarrs versus Éire Óg game. I mean, we thought this would be closer, I think. I mean, St. Finbarrs, they kind of just put Éire Óg away. One of the key things, obviously, a lethal inside trio for St. Finbarrs. They scored all but 1 point of Finbarrs' tally. Conor McCrickard hit 2 goals and a point. Stephen Sherlock hit 9 points. And Killian Myers-Murphy hit 3 points. That was enough to get past Éire Óg, who never really hit their full potential in this game, in my opinion. And yeah, Finbarrs into the final now.
Yeah, completely. And the big thing to take from this was the efficiency of Finbarrs, I think. And I was looking at the stats provided by GA Statsman there on it, and that I think it was up to the first 45 minutes. Finbarrs had scored every single one of their opportunities. They converted. So like that's just a ridiculous level of conversion, and something that you so rarely see. Kind of particularly at club level, you might maybe inter-county level you see teams really prioritising that, but to see a club team being so efficient, it was something else really. And look, you've already briefly talked about the forward line for them as well, and that kind of the trio of Stephen Sherlock, Conor McCrickard, and Killian Myers-Murray, like they look absolutely lethal right now. And that forward line's going to be an awful lot for every team to kind of contain going forward in the rest of this competition.
Yeah, without doubt. And then on the flip side, Austin Stacks beat Newcastle West by 115 to 8 points. And Austin Stacks are kind of the other side of the coin, in my opinion. They build off defence. They're a very defensively sound side. Brendan O'Sullivan's 42nd minute goal killed off Newcastle West's challenge, but by then, in my opinion, it was already inevitable that Stacks were going to win. I think it'd just be fascinating. And the efficiency stat that you pointed out about Finbarrs, I think that's massive, because against Austin Stacks, you don't get that many chances because they are so defensively tight at the back. I think their efficiency in that final against Stacks will have to be crucial. And if they get it right, I think they can get over the line.
Yeah, I think so. And it's a great point, because I think going forward, that full forward line against the Austin Stacks full back line is a really interesting one to match up. You've all probably seen the headlines. So like Dylan Casey and Jack O'Shea and that full back line for Austin Stacks have both been called up to the senior panel. So both are absolutely flying this year and stuff. So to see them kind of picking up Sherlock and McCrickard as well it's going to be it's going to be a very, very interesting one to watch. And they also do really, it'll be interesting to see as well if Hayes comes back into the fold now for Finbarrs. I know he was ruled out injured, and he's arguably been probably one of their best players this year. He might come back in centre half forward as well, so he gives another option as well. Big physical presence, and he's a cracking player too. So it's shaping up to be another really, really good final. Again, some of the matchups will be really interesting too. I think the other player that's really impressed me has been Cork ex-hurler Billy Hennessy, he's been let go from the panel, and there's kind of talk, because he's been so good, I think, for Finbarrs this year, that maybe he might be looking for a football kind of call up to the Cork panel there. So that'll be an interesting one to keep watching. And I think based off what I've seen so far, I think I'll probably be going with Finbarrs to be my early favourite to beat Stacks. I know probably the bookies will have Stacks ahead, but based on what I've seen, I'd be leaning towards Finbarrs to get the job done.
Yeah, I'm finding it really difficult to pick who I'm going to go with, because I backed Austin Stacks against Cairns O'Reilly's in that Kerry final when O'Reilly's were backed by a lot of people to beat Stacks. I was thinking, Stacks are just efficient. They just get the win no matter what. Coming into this final against Finbarrs, my mind has kind of moved a little bit. I'm not going to lie, I'm more open to the idea now that Finbarrs are going to win. I mean, they look very impressive against Éire Óg. And Stacks, while they are a very, very good team, they don't have that spark. They seem to get the job done. Finbarrs have match winners in Stephen Sherlock, Conor McCricket, as was mentioned. They have pure match winners, where Stacks are kind of a bit of an efficient machine. I just think they don't have that star power. I know they have Donaghy, and I know they have some very good footballers, but I don't think that they have the personnel that Finbarrs have, which is why I think it's such a tough one to call, because it's Finbarrs, I think, have the better players, but I think Austin Stacks have the more efficient system. That's why I think it's really hard to call who's going to win this one. I think if I had to pick, I would lean towards Stacks just by a point or two. I think there's a very good chance that the conditions are dreadful and Stacks can drag Finbarrs into a real tough game and make them play on their terms, which obviously will lead to a victory for them. But I think if Finbarrs can remain efficient up front, convert all their chances, and then be tied at the back, I think that they can get the job done too.
Yeah, I completely get that. And I think it's going to be very interesting. It's kind of, when you mention that, like some of the players that are going to be in around that middle third, I think, like you talked about Greg Horan, another player called up to the senior panel. Brendan O'Sullivan's another huge man there. They'll be coming up against Ian Maguire, kind of Cork midfielder and everything. And like I really hope that Brian Hayes will be back now for Finbarrs, because he's a superb player. And I think based off what I've kind of been hearing, that I think he's probably going to lean the football route as well. So he's going to be an absolutely huge player for Cork going forward. So look, if they have him back, I really think that they can dominate that middle kind of, and with their physicality kind of the players in midfield. So yeah, I think based off just that scoring power, and you look at Sherlock at club level, and he's just a scoring machine, I suppose, at club level. So I just, like you were saying, I don't really see the scorers in the Austin Stacks forward line. I know they did quite well at the weekend, albeit against probably like not the strongest now Newcastle West side, I would say. So I'd be a bit worried about their scoring ability, I think, and that's probably why I'd be going Finbarrs, just due to their ability to consistently put up huge scores. So yeah, that's probably why I'd lean to go with them by maybe 2 or 3 points.
Yeah, well, either way, it'll be fascinating to see how it turns out. So, guys, that is the end of this episode of the Play On GA podcast Club Roundup Gaelic Football Edition. We hope you've enjoyed it. Don't forget to look at our other content, and also don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. And until the next video, guys, take care.